Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But what about the backstory? All the stuff that happens behind the scenes. All the paths that lead to the story. My name is Yemisi Adegoke, and I'm a multimedia journalist and producer of Behind All the Stories. This podcast goes under the curtain with storytellers from all over the world. Journalists, poets, photographers, writers will all be shedding light on how they found their way to the beginning and what pushes them to make it all the way to the end. We'll be talking about the good, the ugly, and sometimes the life-changing.
I do not flinch. Instead, I stick to the original storyline I had preconceived to offer in the probable circumstance that my cover was blown. At this point, Sukomi sent for a cane and orders me to remove my shirt and trousers, leaving only my singlet and boxer briefs. Then he descends on me. 3 rounds of beating. The first with several lashes of the cane searing straight into my skin and leaving me with blood and blisters. The second in similar pattern with my hands cuffed behind my back, targeting the interior and exterior joints of my ankles, knees, hips, elbows, and shoulders. Still, I do not disclose I'm a journalist.
That's the voice of Bisayo Shoyombo, an investigative journalist based in Nigeria, reading from his award-nominated investigative series Into Nigeria's Prisons. One word comes to mind when I think of Bisayo: balls, like serious ones. He's the type of journalist they write about in movies, kicking in doors, sniffing out crooked police officers, and exposing corruption. For this story, Bisayo transformed himself into a man called Ojo. He grew out his hair, shaved his beard, and started loitering around the streets of Lagos, trying to get the police to arrest him. They did, and he was locked up for over a week in a bid to try and expose the state of the system. I mean, how do you even prepare for a story like that?
So basically, it was more of mental preparation because I was 100% sure that it wasn't going to be a pleasurable experience. Whoever had anything to do with the police or with the prison, I spoke with the person to try to find out what the experience was like. Anywhere I saw a prison-related story, I made sure I read it. I made sure I talked to myself over and over again to ask if I wanted to do it, and I said yes.
But then, as we heard you read in your article, you got caught with a phone that you'd been using to record things and you were beaten up for it. You must have been so terrified.
I was afraid, to be honest, but don't forget, this was a story I started to ideate in 2017 and only pursued in 2019. So I had more than 2 years to psych myself up, for the pain ahead. Each time I was afraid of what could happen to me in police, in prison, I kept on telling myself the reasons for which I was doing that story far outweighed the fears that I had, and I shouldn't let anything stand in the way.
Did you ever reach a point inside where you were kind of like, you know what, this is great, but I can't do this anymore, like it's time for me to stop, like I'm actually in fear of my life?
There was no going back. As long as the pain had an end, then I had to enjoy it. I never for a second in prison felt that I should give up. Because at that point, if I did, that was the end of the story.
And this isn't the first risky story you've done. I mean, you've gone undercover in lots of really quite dangerous situations before. But would you say this is the toughest one you've done?
It's the prison story because for the first time my cover was blown. This was the first time I was deviating from the original plan and it backfired. And in addition, I didn't envisage that I would be tortured. I felt maybe I would be beaten by prisoners. I felt, the conditions wouldn't be nice, the health, the feeding. Those were the things I prepared for. This was the first time I did a story, and afterwards, I had to spend time with a doctor. I had to spend time with a physiotherapist. So, by far, this was the toughest story I did.
But no regrets?
It's something I would do over and over again because we cannot afford to give up on this country. I've always thought that Nigerians need to stop advocating a better country only with their mouth. People have to take action. The journalist has to ask himself how we can use his journalism to advance the ideals of a better country. I don't want this country to continue the way it is, you know. And when we don't understand the depths of our problem, we can't even start talking about tackling them.
Ah, so you're an idealist.
I'm not idealistic about what needs to be done for this country. I am not under the impression that I am going to change Nigeria. I'm not under the impression that any journalist somewhere can change this country. But I know that we can give the generation behind us some hope. We can get more people pulling in the same direction. I'm not thinking I'm going to record any overnight success in terms of where this country can get to in relation to its potentials.
I hear you, but this obviously comes at a massive risk to yourself. I mean, Nigeria is not an easy place to work in. I mean, I've been working here for about 8 years now, and it's tough. And you know, some people are saying that the climate's becoming even more difficult. I think in the Reporters Without Borders report last year, they said that Nigeria is one of West Africa's most difficult and dangerous places to be a journalist.
I know that there are quite a number of people who are not particularly pleased with what I do. So I do the best that I can to keep myself safe. I do what I can and I leave the rest. You know, there are certain measures that I put in place. I don't live a normal life in that sense. Um, I don't have the freedom to do what what some of my mates can do, you know, because for every move I make, I'm thinking security. And then someone was trying to talk me out of journalism, and I said, look, promise me that if I drop investigative journalism today, I'm going to live to 70. Can you promise me? And there are so many ways to die. Can you promise me that if I drop this journalism, I am immune to all those other ways of dying? And it was speechless. But I hear it a lot that, oh, he went to prison for fame. And I'm wondering, if I wanted fame, I should go to the music industry. I should try to sing, not try to go to prison. But people say, oh, he did it for fame, it's for money, it's for awards. I don't mind at all. Like I said earlier, it's not like I'm doing what I'm doing at gunpoint. It's what I know that I have been called to do, because the day I stop out of fear for my life, that's the day I die.
I mean, it must be hard to pick, but what story would you say has impacted your life the most?
Forgotten Soldiers. That's a five-part series I did in 2016 on the pain of soldiers who got injured fighting Boko Haram. There was a particular one. He was shot by Boko Haram in Gombe State while defending his boss. He was shot in the leg. The leg was badly managed to the point that it became maggot infested. The leg had to be amputated. And despite visits from senior army officials when he was in hospital, they didn't give him a prosthesis when he left. Eventually, when they were going to give him one, it was still one that came out of a process tainted by corruption. I did that story after he had begged the army for 44 months for a prosthesis. After that story, he got the prosthesis. A Nigerian former minister who said she wanted to remain anonymous sent his wife 100,000 naira to start a small business, but he got the prosthesis. And on my birthday in 2016, I went back to Kaduna and I found him. And I saw him, he was walking. You know, he could take care of himself. His wife had put to bed a baby boy. You know, he could walk again. The joy I felt in that moment is still indescribable. That because of my story, a man had found his feet again. He could then assist his wife in taking care of their newborn baby. I couldn't be prouder.
What prompted that story? How did you find it? What was the process?
That came from a 2014 trip to Chibok. On the highways, I saw lots of soldiers in the scorching sun. And I thought, wow, this is a lot of sacrifice. Are these guys being taken care of? What happens to their family? And I did one or two findings. I found out many of them were injured. If a story is easy, I'm not interested. Yes, because There are lots of journalists who run away from certain types of stories. So I'd rather let them think about doing the easy stories. If it's what anybody wants to do, I'm normally not interested. I'm looking for impact, a story that has the potential for impact. That's the first thing I look at.
You're obviously super passionate about journalism. And, a lot of people feel like you have to kind of go to school to be a journalist. You've got to study media or you've got to do that type of stuff. I know you didn't do that. So what was your sort of journey into the profession?
I studied animal science in uni. I have no business in journalism. I have no academic business in journalism. I should be in a farm somewhere right now trying to raise sheep. I joined the press in my 100 level. I started writing, and at the end of 100 level, I was on the list of interns sent to The Guardian. And the editor, then Mr. Jaman Anikolapo, liked my work, encouraged me to continue writing even after the internship. And without ever having a conversation about mentorship, he just naturally became my mentor. So, because on campus, for instance, there were things that happened that we wrote about, and they got the attention of the authorities. And I felt, wow, if this journalism actually can work this way on campus, why not do it mainstream after school?
And how hard was it to actually make a career out of it?
After The Guardian, it was tough because there was no vacant slot. There was no vacant full-time slot at the time I completed my NYSC. So I had a very rough time trying to get a job where I wasn't owed. Life was really tough for 2, 3 years. And that's the story with most Nigerian journalists. But it was so bad that I couldn't buy new shirts for myself. They were getting torn at the elbow, and I would cover them up with the jacket of my suit. I remember I once had to interview the late Ambassador Olushola. I didn't even have money to go to his house and get back to mine. And so I had to walk, no, not walk, trek, because it was a trek. I had to trek to my house for maybe something close to 2 hours.
Man, did you ever think of was there ever a point where you were kind of like, maybe I should do something else?
Never, not even for a second. But there were times when I wondered why it was so tough. But I always knew that this was the only thing I wanted to do. So I wasn't going to cave into the teething problems I had. I just knew it was journalism or nothing.
Wow. You're part of this really great wave of Nigerian investigative journalists. There are people doing a lot of really powerful work, across different media houses. What does the future look like to you, like the landscape of Nigerian journalism?
I'm really excited. There are a couple of young guys coming through. I see the energy, the enthusiasm, the interest, and I am really excited. I hope that the funding doesn't dwindle. You cannot try to strengthen democracy without strengthening the media. You can't expect a media that performs its core responsibilities if it depends on corporate Nigeria. Investigative reporting is quite expensive. But as long as the funding isn't a problem, I see a new generation of vibrant and enthusiastic journalists. There are quite a number of them that I have high hopes for. And I think if we maintain that momentum, there are better days ahead. I take each day as it comes. And while I am here, I want to use my journalism to serve the public interest as long as I'm here. And we'll take it one day at a time.
That's Fisayo Shoyombo. You can find him on Twitter on @Fisayo Shoyombo and check out his investigations, including Forgotten Soldiers and Inside Nigeria's Prisons, online on cable.ng.com. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Behind All the Stories, a podcast hosted and produced by me, Yemisi Adegoke, sound editing and mixing by Kelechi Anozia, artwork by Manuela Bonomi, and music by New Age Music. with a Z. See you next time.